So in this video, we're going to talk about how do we graph quadratic functions and then label their attributes. So what we're going to be doing in this video is mainly we're going to take the equation and then we're going to graph it. So the first thing that we need to write down in our notes that it's going to become very important is the formula for the axis of symmetry. Okay, so the axis of symmetry is the line that cuts this graph in half. So it's really important that we get that first. And the formula to get that is going to be negative b all over 2a. And so basically what that is going to look like, if you have an equation that looks like this, that's in standard form, so this is standard form of a quadratic, then a, b, and c are going to be numbers. And so we're going to take b, which is the coefficient in front of the x, and take the opposite sign of it and divide it by twice the value of a, which is the coefficient next to the x squared. After you get the axis of symmetry, remember that the axis of symmetry goes through the vertex. It's actually the x value of our vertex. So after you get that, you can plug that back in and you can get the y value of the vertex. And then getting the vertex is basically the main point because that is the middle of your graph. And then so we are going to get some points that are on both sides of the graph. And again, they're going to be symmetrical to each other, which is nice. Okay, so we're going to do our very first example. So let's go ahead and do this first. So here we're going to go ahead and graph this equation. And so your assignment's going to look just like this. So I'm going to give you another sort of like equation that looks like this. And you're going to have to make a table and graph it and then tell me the attributes. So make sure that you're taking good notes on this. So the very first thing that we want to do is we want to find that axis of symmetry and then go ahead and find the vertex. So if you remember, first we need to identify our A, B, and C. So -2 is going to be our A, +8 is our B, and then -6 is our C. We will get back to talking about the importance of C in a second, but for right now, all we need is B and A. So if you remember that formula, it's going to be negative b, so the opposite of +8 is -8, over twice -2. So this is going to be -8 divided by -4, which is +2. So the x value of our vertex is going to be 2. So I'm going to make our table here. So this is going to be x, and this is going to be f of x, which is our y's. And then again, the vertex is right in the middle, so I'm going to write it right in the middle. So this is the x value of the vertex. Now what we're going to do is we're going to plug in this 2 and get out the y value of the vertex. So we're going to plug it into this equation. So we're going to find what f of 2 is. And then that's going to get us -2 times 2 squared plus 8 times 2 minus 6. Well, this right here, 2 squared is 4 plus 16 minus 6. And then -2 times 4 is -8. Again, we already got this, plus 16 minus 6. And we're going to do this from left to right. So -8 plus 6 is going to be +8 minus 6 is 2. So our y value in our vertex is 2. So we're going to go ahead and type that in to this table here. Okay, great. So this is basically the hardest part of this, is finding that vertex. Now that I have found the vertex, I'm going to go ahead and plug in some x's that come before this and come after this number. So numbers that come before 2 are 1, 0, -1. The numbers that come after 2 are 3, 4, and 5. So now what we're going to do is we're going to plug in 1 and figure out what the y value would be here. So -2 times 1 squared plus 8 times 1 minus 6. Well, -2, 1 squared is just 1, And a lot of people will say 2, but we're doing 1 times 1. So that's going to be 1. And then 8 times 1 minus 6. Now we're going to multiply negative 2 here. You get a positive 8 here minus 6. And then put this together. Negative 2 plus 8 is going to be 6. And 6 minus 6 is 0. So this is really nice because that means we just got our zeros on this graph. When I plugged in 1, I got a 0. So remember that our quadratic function is going to be symmetrical. So we should get a 0 when we plug in 3 as well, but let's double check. If I plug in a 3 here, and again, let me go ahead and type that in so that way our work doesn't go away when we finish. Okay, so when I plug in a 3 here, let's see what we get. Negative 2, 3 squared is just 9. And then 8 times 3 is 24 minus 6. Negative 2 times 9 is going to be negative 18. If I put together my 18, and if I take away the negative 18 from 24, we're left with 6. And 6 minus 6 is 0. So you also get 0 here. And what you should be noticing is basically when you plug in a 0, you're going to get the same number as when you plug in a 4 because remember that quadratics are symmetrical. So this is going to look like this. It's going to look like a mirror. So now let's go ahead and plug in 0. So when you plug in 0 here, you have negative 2 times 0 squared plus 8 times 0 minus 6. Well, whenever I multiply anything by 0, it's just 0. So this cancels, and so does this, and you're left with negative 6. So remember, I talked about that the C is important because this is actually always your y-intercept because it's your constant that's left when you plug in a 0 for x. And so remember the definition of a y-intercept, it's the value of y when x is 0. So let's go ahead and plug in 6. And obviously, if you plug in 4, you should get 6 as well. And then let's plug in our last number so that we can get our last 2 points. Let's plug in a negative 1. And so you have negative 2 times negative 1 squared plus 8 times negative 1 minus 6. Well, negative 1 squared is going to be 1. 8 times negative 1 is just negative 8 minus 6. And so 2 times 1 is negative 2 minus 8 minus 6. Well, negative 2 minus 8 is going to be negative 10 minus 6 is also negative 16. So now we're going to get a negative 16 here, and remember it's symmetrical, so that means when you plug in a 5 you should get negative 16 as well. And again, you can always do this work if you're uncertain or if you graph this and it just doesn't look right. Okay, so now that we're done with our table, we're going to take our points and we're going to graph them. So the first point that we have here is negative 1, negative 16. So negative 1, negative 16 would be all the way down here. Okay, and then the next point that we have is 0, 6. It's our y-intercept. So 0, negative 6. That's what we had put here. We should have put negative 6. Okay, so negative 6 should be right here. And then the next thing that we have is 1, 0. So 1, 0. And then we had our vertex of 2, 2. And then we had 3, 0. And then we had 4, negative 6, and 5, negative 16. Okay, so great. All right, so it does have that U shape that we're looking for, so we did a great job. And then now let's go ahead and let's connect this the best way that we can. I understand that doing it virtually, it can be kind of a pain, but your notebook should be a little bit easier to do. And then let's make sure that we have those arrows there. So again, this is a sketch. So it pretty much, that's what it looks like. So we notice that it's going, it looks like it's turning downwards. There is a maximum point here. Our y-intercept was -6. We noticed all that. So now let's go ahead and answer these questions. So remember that if you didn't do so, we put those arrows there because we could have plugged in more numbers. Like our x's, we could have decided to put in decimals if we wanted. More numbers, we could have kept going, but we don't have all that time. So we're just going to put our arrows to say that. So that means that if you write your x's can go anywhere to the left or to the right. So that means that your domain, which is your set of x's, is all real numbers. Now, for your range, we're looking for our y values, right? So our y values, they start up here and they keep going down. So if we're trying to describe this, we would say all real numbers less than or equal to 2. And so we're going to go ahead and type that in. So f of x is less than or equal to. So the way you can write that in your when you're doing your assignment is you put the less than sign and then put the equal sign, and then it makes it into less than or equal to 2. Submit. So now my zeros, we had actually gotten that from the table, but let's look at the graph. So my zeros are right here. So that's 1 and then 3, and then again they were on the graph as well. So we have gotten 0 at 1 and at 3. So I have 2 places to kind of double check my answers. 1 and 3. Oh, whoops, 1 and 3. And then what is the y-intercept of this function? So let's look for the y-intercept. I think I did a poor job sketching it, but it should be here. It should be right here. But again, I didn't do a very good job, but you can go ahead and look at your table for this and you would notice what that's going to look like, which is right here. When I plug in a 0, I got a -6. So that's my y-intercept. And then -6. Okay, and then what's the vertex of the function? Well, the vertex, that was the very first thing we got was 2, 2. And then is this vertex a minimum or a maximum? Well, let's look at the graph. This vertex of 2, 2 was on the top. It was the top point, so it is a maximum point. So that's where we're going to click here. Maximum. The reason this is the highest point in the graph. And then what is the minimum or the maximum value of the function? So whenever I'm asking for the value of the function, I'm asking you for the y value, because it doesn't make sense to have a minimum or maximum of the x's. So my maximum value here is actually right there, which is that's the highest it can be, is 2. So it's basically the y value of the vertex if it's a maximum. So it's 2. And then the last question is, what's that equation of the axis of symmetry? So remember, it's a line, so we would write x equals, and it goes through the vertex. So x equals 2, because that is the x value of the vertex. All right, so this is the end of this video, and so I hope you found this helpful and that basically the assignment, you are able to do this. If you have any questions, definitely feel free to reach out and let me know. So hope you found this video helpful and you've taken good notes.